Welcome to a community update from the Department of Senior Affairs. I'm your host, Ed Nunez. Today's title of the show is AT&SF 2926, Albuquerque's own steam locomotive. With us to discuss that today is Michael Hartshorne, MD. He's also the president of New Mexico Steam Locomotive and Railroad Historical Society. Michael, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. You know, we talked about this, Mike, I think you and I have been talking about this for 2 months. You know, we just haven't been able to get the show on. We're glad you're here. But there's so much background with this very special locomotive, very special. I mean, some of the things you told me before the show, and we'll get to some of that later. But you know, I think everybody that's seen, it was just to refresh everybody's memory, if you will, Mike, where it was in the fence on off of the park. If you just refresh everybody's memory on that.
Sure, this is the locomotive that was pushed into Coronado Park in 1956, donated to the city. It was a great place for local people to come have a picnic, kids to play on the locomotive, climb on the locomotive, fall off the locomotive. It was a landmark, and it stayed there until the year 2000.
I think everybody, as you said, a landmark. You know, just you know, we'll get into the history here.
It is a landmark.
Gosh,
it's a registered New Mexico landmark.
So literally a landmark and a registered landmark at that. But I did remember the memories just seeing it there in the yard. Who didn't see it? If you lived in, you know, of course, somebody, some of our younger viewers may not have, but mostly everybody, like you said, fell off of it, looked at it, took pictures, had a picnic, and great memories of that. Michael, what kind of locomotive is it? What kind of locomotive is it?
This is a really big steam locomotive. It was built in 1944 to help with the war effort. You got to understand that during the middle of a war, they needed every locomotive, every piece of rolling stock they could get to move troops, to move passengers, equipment. And so the Santa Fe built another batch of 30 steam locomotives just like this one. And they called them 2900s because the first one was 2900 and then went up through 2929. This one was finished in May of 1956 and immediately put into service. It was used initially for passenger service, and then after the war, they put some improvements on it, some upgrades, if you will, and it could do anything that the railroad needed done, and did so until 1953 when they finally retired it.
Can you mention again, I'm sorry, when it was finished? It was, did you say?
May of 1944.
Finished in May of 1944, so during the wartime, and it did provide some wartime service, and then afterward, even for 11 more years.
Yeah, if your granddad was in the Army, he may have ridden behind this to go off to war.
Actually, my father was, so I'm kind of, my father was a World War II vet, so I'm trying to wrap my mind around that. Again, a historical landmark. Michael, so many more questions we have to get to. When and where was it made?
This locomotive was built at the Baldwin Locomotive Works in Pennsylvania. It's not far from Philadelphia. It doesn't exist anymore. Baldwin was a gigantic manufacturer of steam locomotives, and the Santa Fe Railroad liked to design their own, so they had their own mechanical engineers, and they designed them, but they were actually built by this company called Baldwin. So it's like Cadillac. It's a big name.
I see. Okay. Okay. I think you mentioned what did it do. Now I think the other, you mentioned what it did. I guess the other question is why, 11 years of service and it was retired. Why was it retired?
Well, the push, even before World War II, the push was on to change to diesel electric locomotives. They were a lot easier to maintain, and that was important. In the desert Southwest, they didn't need water, and that was important because finding good water to feed a steam locomotive even then was difficult. And there were a lot of economic reasons why diesels were a good idea. But you got to understand that during World War II, a manufacturer that could build a very high horsepower, small and compact, lightweight diesel engine, well, they couldn't afford to put those in locomotives. They needed them for submarines, Navy patrol ships, and that sort of thing. So the War Production Board said, sorry, can't have any more diesel engines till after the war. So most of the railroads went back to building steam engines to service the need that they had. The other thing was the War Production Board wouldn't let them use those fancy nickel steels to build the boilers because nickel steel was going to be armor plating for tanks and ships and things. So they had to use soft, mild steels, which was a blessing because they got heavier to hold the same pressure. And so the locomotives actually being heavier got better traction on the rails. They could pull better. And the mild steels age better and they're easier to repair than the nickel steels. So we got lucky on this one.
A lot of interesting stuff there because you mentioned, needed for war production, you needed the tanks and things like that, and 11 years service, kind of an early retirement, but we understand why, just what you mentioned.
They switched over to diesels as fast as they could after World War II.
American technology, and there's always something better around the way.
But the people who designed these steam locomotives were the brightest mechanical engineers in the country. And they were using slide rules, drafting tables, books full of trigonometric functions, and really good brains. And they came up with some amazing technology, which is just kind of marvel to study. As we take this thing apart and we work on it, it's like industrial archaeology. You learn so much about what really bright people did to solve a transportation problem.
Well, let's mention that. Drafting boards and the things you mentioned, no computers, nothing like trigonometry, just old-fashioned hard work. Not to say everybody doesn't do that today. There's different tools available. We're not criticizing anybody, but I'm just trying to imagine that in my mind. Wow, it just makes the project even that more interesting and intriguing, I think.
Well, we're saving a piece of history, a tiny piece of history. Almost all those locomotives are now Chevys and Razor Blades and things like that. They've all been scrapped except for just a precious few. Only a couple of them of this size and style actually are running in the United States, and them not very often. But this is sort of the honor thy father and mother commandment. What we're doing is remembering what those people did to make the world that we get to live in now. So for us, it's not just a mechanical toy that's intriguing. It's also saying, hey, my granddad was important. Look what he did.
I see. It's much more than that. Michael, what is the New Mexico Steam Locomotive and Railroad Historical Society? A lot of people don't know what that is. Can you tell us what that is?
Sure. First, I have to apologize for the name. It's way too long. It takes a lot of practice to say it. It took me months to be able to get it without stuttering. It's a group of all volunteers, about 350 signed up members that pay an annual contribution to be members. In that group, we have every conceivable kind of person you've ever met, every religion, every political persuasion, and every professional background. It's weighted a little bit toward the retired or nearly retired or semi-retired, but we have college kids and high school kids, and there's a pretty good spread that represents our community. We've got engineers, many of whom work for the labs at Sandia. We've got carpenters, plumbers, pipe fitters, welders, machinists. We've got people who are school teachers and guidance counselors and retired cops. You can find a little bit of everything working on that locomotive. What we have very little of is professional railroad people. We've got an Amtrak engineer and a BNSF engineer and a rail runner engineer. And after that, none of us have ever worked for the railroad.
That's interesting.
We are now.
Very interesting. So how does that work? I mean, you really don't have anybody that's been on a railroad per se, but you do have some people that have worked at other levels of transportation.
Yeah, it's tough because there really isn't a pool of people who know how to do what we're doing. So we're having to relearn things that went away years ago. Albuquerque had thousands of men and women working at the old back shops in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s that could do any of the jobs we're doing. They'd done them many times. It was a routine. They understood how the systems work. We're having to explore and learn how things are done. So there's a lot of historical research. There's consultation with other groups that have restored steam locomotives. But basically, none of us have ever restored a steam locomotive before we had to learn how.
That's interesting. Was there anything guideline to follow? I'm going to ask. Was there any guideline to follow there? Or you're making it up as you go along, and I don't mean that in a bad way.
It kind of is making it up as you go along, but we've learned so much doing it. Finding the original drawings, sometimes eBay, sometimes in a museum, sometimes in a private collection. Finding specifications, interviewing old-timers who still remember what they did as a kid when they worked on machines like this. And we pieced together knowledge from other groups that have done this. There's a group in California, and there's one up in Wyoming. There's a few around, and they're very helpful. The Cumbres and Toltec and the Durango and Silverton people have given us some hints and help because they tackle similar problems with steam locomotives. We have learned so much, though, that I keep telling guys, the second one's going to be so much easier than the first.
I can imagine.
You usually
I
get
can
rags
imagine.
thrown at you when you say things like that.
Yeah, because you're not, yeah, there's a lot of work to do on this one. Michael, we got a little sidetracked there, but when was the society formed, by whom and why, and does it have regular meetings going back to the New Mexico Steam Locomotive and Railroad Historical Society?
Sorry for the sidetrack.
That's all right. No, you know
But
what, there's going to be a lot of
at
that
least
with
that's
this.
a railroad term.
Right.
Okay. In the late 1990s, a guy named Ed Bukov, who had been not an engineer, been a fireman on this locomotive when he was a young man, got some of his buddies together and said, hey, we ought to fix up that locomotive and make it run again. So it was a very loose organization. He eventually moved out of state. The guys that were left behind got formally organized. We became a 501c3, you know, file your bylaws with the Attorney General, get a business license, all the things you have to do, start getting a yearly audit and get organized. We persuaded Mayor Baca's administration to sell us the locomotive for $1. It took a while to figure out who it belonged to. They finally decided, well, it must belong to Parks and Rec because it's in a park. And they were okay with us moving it. For one thing, it was beginning to shed asbestos, and that was considered kind of a bad thing. So Mayor Baca sold us the locomotive for $1, and he looked up, signed the bill of sale, and he said, fine, now get it out of my park. And that cost $163,000 to lay temporary tracks down past the Creamland Dairy and turn north and get it up on a spur that connected with the main line. Then we were kind of stuck. We got a locomotive out of the park. They're building the Big I. We're not in the way of that, thank God. It's not in our way. And we spent 2 years trying to figure out, now what do we do? Representative Heather Wilson went to bat for us, though. She was in office at the time, and we had found a spur which is owned by the federal government. Part of it belongs to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and part of it belongs to the GSA. And it was designed so they could bring freight cars into their loading docks and some warehouses. But they never used it. Everything comes in on a truck. So we actually got permission to use this piece of ground. It's in the Sawmill District off of 8th Street, just a little bit south of I-40. And we set up shop with a locomotive and a sheet of concrete. And we had to build a crane, build a pit, build machine shops, tool shops, storage, administrative
Build it all
areas.
from the ground up.
Yeah, my wife calls it our clubhouse. It's more than a clubhouse. It's a small industrial complex. But we had to do that in addition to working on the locomotive, fundraising in the meantime, trying to get ourselves better organized to tackle the job. I'm so proud of the members of our society that they've been able to get after a job like this with the long view. This isn't a job for somebody who's in and out in 3 weeks. This is in 15 years.
Big picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my mind. The $163,000 for the temporary track, incredible. That's just an incredible story, and hopefully you sent some pictures of that. I don't know what you
We did.
You sent. Good. We going back to the society, Michael. Who are the members? How does someone join up? How is the society governed? Questions like that.
It's pretty straightforward. Anybody's welcome to sign up. Our minimum annual contribution, you can find a very simple sign-up form online on our website. And $30 gets you an individual membership, though we encourage greater contributions if you can manage. $50 a family membership, and there are some people who bought lifetime memberships for the sum of $500. Now, that just gets you 4 newsletters and electronic communications from the organization. If you want to actually turn a wrench or go get your knuckles dirty or represent us to the community in our outreach program, our historical program, we run you through a training course, which is part safety training course. We apply all the usual OSHA rules, even though we don't have to. We're all volunteers, so theoretically OSHA doesn't apply. Yeah, it does. You might as well live with it. It's an industrial setting, so hard hats, protective gear, safe practices for working. A lot of people didn't do this, so we have to teach them. We also teach them about the organization and get them into it. Once you're in, once you've got 500 hours of service to the organization, if you want to run for office as a member of our board of directors, you have to round up a nomination and then persuade people that they ought to elect you for a 3-year term on the board. The board, once it's elected, selects its officers, and we have a president and a vice president and a secretary and a treasurer, the usual things that you would have in an organization. And we keep up all of the bureaucratic stuff that backs us up with our government as a legitimate 501c3 nonprofit.
Gosh, yeah, man, that's quite a lot of stuff there, and I'm sure there's a lot of people, and you mentioned you have a lot of people from different areas working on this outstanding project. When and how did the society acquire the 2926? And you mentioned that, how it was already moved out of Coronado Park. We'll go to the next question, which is where is the AT&SF 2926? Where is it now?
The street address is 1833 8th Street Northwest. It's a little bit difficult to get off of I-40 because 8th Street doesn't go underneath I-40. But you get off at 6th or you get off at 12th and work your way around the access roads until you find 8th Street. Head south until you see the railroad tracks. We've got a great big sign. It's pretty obvious when you look around and you see 1,000,000 pounds of steel, you found us.
Yeah, no tricks there. I'm sure that it's pretty obvious, the project you mentioned. And I think this is a real key question here. What will a completely restored 2926 steam locomotive do? Again, it was built in 44, you said, and, had 11 years of service before it was retired. So, we're talking about a time that's passed. So what will a fully restored 2926 steam locomotive do?
We want to use it for excursions for passengers. It wouldn't be every day or every month. It would be intermittent and occasionally big events. Good for community celebrations. My favorite trip right now is a trip we've been planning to go from Albuquerque at the Alvarado Transportation Center with a passenger train behind that locomotive up through Glorieta Pass all the way up to Las Vegas, New Mexico. Stop, maybe do it on a Saturday. Let people out. There are some really neat old hotels that have been rebuilt in that town, and
Las Vegas.
It's really picking up. We would turn the train around, tie up for the night, and then the next day get everybody out of the hotels, back on the train, and run back to Albuquerque and drop you off at the Alvarado Transportation Center. So we want to pull people around our state, and we want to have it a celebration every time we do it.
Celebration of the locomotive, celebration of the state, the whole thing.
You bet. It says Santa Fe all over the side of it.
Again, we're talking about a time that a lot of people, especially a lot of shows about senior affairs and seniors, and there's going to be so many people that are going to get a big, huge kick out of talking about this or hearing you talk about it. I guess the other question that I have is the timeline. And I don't know if this is a question here, but do you have a target date of?
We do.
Yeah.
And we've pushed that target date back a little bit over the years. When we first had this locomotive, the organization was in what I call the magic phase. Some of the old guys that were running it thought, well, you get the locomotive, you take it downtown to the old back shops, somehow you get in there, something magic happens, and then 6 months later you're off steaming around the countryside. It's not that simple. We finally got onto our current site in 2002 where we could start building a site. And at first we used to tell people 6 years, we'll be done in 6 years. So every year we say, oh yeah, 6 more years and we'll be done. Now we're down to 1 year. August next summer we should be operating. We're getting that close and we can measure it. Now along the way we put in about $2.1 million as of July of this year into the project, and we put in 125,000 man hours and women hours. I'm supposed to say volunteer hours. But yeah, we have men and women working on the locomotive.
I'm sure you do.
And we're another several $100,000 in cash money and probably another 30,000 hours of work to complete the restoration so that it'll run. At that time, of course, it ain't over. These locomotives require a lot of maintenance in between operations. So the same crew that has learned how to rebuild one will know all the things they need to know about how to care and feed one that's operating. And we get 15 years to operate. And then at the end of that time, the rules are you do a major tear down and rebuild before you can operate again. So it's going to be 15 sweet years, and then it's going to be hard work.
Right now.
Get it ready again.
At the end of that 15, who knows what, maybe it's retired for good. Who knows? I mean,
oh, no.
You're still going to keep
going. No, we're training
going.
young folks how to do this, and we want them, when I'm an old guy in a rocking chair and I can't work on the locomotive anymore, I want some young guys I've trained running it.
I guess the question I have for you is one of the things you said at the time in 1944, it was hard to get water for a steam engine at that time. Do you see any challenges? I mean, with it's not exactly, we're in a lot of rain there. It's not. It's not. We've been in a somewhat of a drought for 7-8 years,
Sure.
and really it's a desert. So is that challenge still the same as in 2015 as it was in 1944?
It isn't that bad now because we only need a tank full of water every 4 or 5 months, not 10 times a day. The tender holds 24,000 gallons of water. That's about 250 miles worth of running. And the problem with water is not that you can't get it, you just can't get it out of a water tower. When you think of it, all those water towers that used to dot the tracks wherever they went around the countryside, they're all gone.
Yes, they are.
So we had to build some special plumbing underneath the tender and set up fittings so that a volunteer firefighter's truck can pump us up out of a hydrant. You pay for the water, with whatever city you're in. But the trick of getting it into the truck is there aren't any water towers, or getting it into the tender is there's no water towers. So our buddies that run the 3751 locomotive out of California say that the most important guy when they go on the road is their volunteer firefighter who's racing ahead of them in his pickup truck to get to the next town, to make sure that the firefighters that promised to be there have the truck ready to go and are hooked up to the hydrant so they can fill up your water tank.
A lot different in 2015 than it was in,
Yeah.
in 1944, but still, it's possible. And the things, I guess the other thing is, I wanted to ask you this too as well. Out of that $2.1 million that you talked about, any federal, state money, anything like that coming in, any federal dollars coming in for restoration?
We have no government money in the project.
No government money at all, none state
It's
money?
all private, and that's the good news
Yeah.
too. If you take federal money, you take a lot of federal oversight. We already have enough federal oversight with the Federal Railway Administration. They have rules for the maintenance and operation of steam locomotives that go back to the Civil War, and they've been working on them for a long time. And they're all safety rules, safe operating rules, designed to protect the people who use these machines and the people around them. So we have plenty of government oversight in terms of being able to legally operate this machine. But in the meantime, I don't want to spend half my life filling out paperwork for a government grant that wants in-depth reports and justifications and so forth. When somebody gives us a buck, about 2% of it, 2 cents, go into administrative overhead. We got to pay for the porta potty, we got to pay for the computer use, we got to pay for the telephone lines. But 98 cents out of a dollar goes right into the locomotive. Nobody's getting fat off this thing. All the volunteers nobody is paid. Our money comes from small donors across the community. A lot of small businesses in town have helped us. A lot of people come in with a $20 bill, and that's what they can give you. Some people have got more. But we have an enormous amount of support over the years from small donors. We don't really have anything against the idea of a big fat cat donor. We just have never met one. And we tried for years to see if we could get state money or federal money. We never succeeded, and now I'm glad we didn't.
For the obvious reasons that you just mentioned, because as you mentioned, the paperwork and the things that you're tied to if you receive that money. People say government overregulates and overdoes a lot of things, and maybe they do. In some cases, not going to argue that, but gosh, that's even more impressive that you're doing it with private money. That's even
I'm
more
really proud of
impressive.
that.
Yeah,
I'm
you
really
should
proud
be.
of that.
There's a lot of things to be proud of here, and that's definitely. I mean, I'm just mind blown about the whole thing. I'm just thinking about this whole thing. But I guess one of the things that people would ask, I mean, you mentioned it. Why does it take so long? I mean, but you mentioned you had to build the thing. You had to get it out. A lot of people would say, why is it taking that long? But you want it, according to what you're telling us, the viewers here, you want this thing to be really to shine, not to be some half-baked project.
The house rules are it's going to be as good as the day it rolled out of the factory or better. So every detail of that locomotive has been disassembled, completely refurbished. In some cases, we have to build new parts. That's why it takes a long time. Working with steel is possible, but it's hard, it's heavy, it's dirty. In the summertime, it's hot. In the wintertime, it's cold. And a lot of it's hand labor. A lot of it can't be fed into a machine. A lot of it has to be done by hand. So we're doing a frame-up restoration on a locomotive that unfortunately all those years was sitting in a city park, and the sprinklers and the rain caused so much rusting that we've had to replace parts of the boiler. There's a special bolt which varies between 12 inches and 3 feet long, called a stay bolt. We've had to replace more than 1,000 of those, each one of which is $300 for the bolt, $100 for the fittings on the ends of it, about $75 worth of welding time to attach that. And when you start multiplying a job out like that by 1,000, and that's just one set of bolts, it gets to be an enormous job. And this is not a tiny locomotive. This is the biggest, heaviest 484 locomotive that was ever built. Probably the fastest, though there's a lot of argument over whose locomotive was really the fastest. It's certainly a labor that only a crazy person in love with steam locomotives would do. It's a ton of work, and it's slow, and it's hard, and we're doing it.
Gosh, I think you already mentioned what has been done to restore the 2926. You did touch on a lot of those things. Did you mention that too?
We've done a lot of things, like completely rebuilding the brake system, taking the cylinders off, which you can stick your head in, and honing them smooth, and building new pistons for them, and packing them and getting them remounted. Tubing inside the boiler. Steam locomotive just looks like a long cylindrical object to most people. What they don't realize is that inside that boiler are flues that carry hot gases from the front or from the back to the front, and then inside them there are smaller tubes called superheaters that reheat steam that's already been made so that it's even at 700 degrees before it's fed to the cylinders. There's 3 miles of steel tubing inside the locomotive, and there's a weld or a seal every 21 feet, and nobody can leak. That's
Wow.
a lot of work.
You're
because
kidding me.
that had to
Gosh,
be done
yeah.
from scratch. All of that steel had to be replaced. So yeah, it takes a long time to do that. We had no idea how long this was going to take. In the magic phase, in 1998, everybody thought, wow, how tough could it be? We'll be done in a couple of months, maybe 6. And as time went along, it turns out that there is just an enormous amount of hard work and detailed work to completely restore one of these machines.
We're going on 17 years, right? I mean, the vision was
Yeah, if
98.
you go all the way back
Yeah, the
to
planning
when people were
stages.
just talking about it, but that's why I said this is a job for somebody who has the long view of things. Somebody who just wants the merit badge, wants to check in, work for one work session on the locomotive, and say, "Hey, I worked on a steam locomotive." That doesn't get the job done. These are people who commit big chunks of their life
About
to
two more-
working on this machine.
Excuse me, Michael. 2 more questions. I want to get to both of them. How may someone interested see the 2926? How may they see it?
Well, the easiest way is to come to our site on Wednesdays or Saturdays. In the summertime, we start at 7:30 in the morning, and we knock off usually about 3 o'clock when it gets just too hot. After we get into October, we'll start a little later in the morning and run a little later in the day. You come to our site, you walk in, we catch you, we put a hard hat on you, we give you a safety briefing, we tell you to get your camera out, and we take you on a tour and answer any questions you've got. And some people want a 5-minute look, and other people spend 5 hours enjoying themselves. So that's the easy way to do it. We have an open meeting on the second Saturday of every month at 7:30 in the morning at the site. Anybody's welcome to sit down and see what we're up to, and we brief the safety plan and the chief mechanical officer's report and the treasurer's report and update ourselves on where we're at. So we love having people come by.
One last question. Want to get to it. How can someone help with the restoration? Got about a minute left.
Well, there's a bunch of ways. You can become a member. The easy way to do that is just go on our website and fill out a form and send it to our secretary, Gail Kirby, and she'll sign you up and we'll start communicating with you. There are people who use Smile Amazon, where you get a tiny percentage of an order that you make under Smile Amazon that goes to our locomotive, so you can pick us as your charity there. There are people who use the Smith's Community Rewards card. If you got a Smith's card, you can go onto their website and declare us as the charity that you're supporting. And it's easy to change charities if you change your mind, you want to support somebody else. There are people who send us cash, checks. We get a lot of PayPal money on our website. People do that.
A lot of different ways.
So If you just basically hit the website, it'll show you all the different things you can do to help us down the road to operating this locomotive.
Very quickly, the website?
It's easy. www.2926.us.
Appreciate it. Michael Hartshorne, MD, President of New Mexico Steam Locomotive and Railroad Historical Society. Thanks so much for being our guest. We sure appreciate it.
My pleasure, Ed.
You bet. For the Department of Senior Affairs, I'm Ed Nunez.